Haley Monroe was beautiful, charming, and always the center of attention. Travis Blake was easygoing, well-liked, and madly in love. But behind closed doors, their relationship was anything but perfect. When Travis was found brutally murdered in his own apartment, all eyes turned to the woman who claimed to love him. What investigators uncovered next shocked even the most seasoned detectives, and it all began with a killer girlfriend who thought she could flirt her way out of murder. The morning started like any other on Pine Ridge Avenue. Neighbors were going about their routines, walking dogs, watering lawns, sipping coffee on their porches. But by mid-morning, the peaceful air was broken by the wail of sirens and the flashing lights of police cars. It all began when Mrs. Langley, the elderly woman who lived across the hall from Travis Blake, noticed a strange smell coming from his apartment. She assumed at first it was a backed-up drain or something left too long in the trash. But as the smell grew worse over 2 days, she became increasingly concerned. Travis wasn't answering his door, and no one had seen him since the weekend. Mrs. Langley finally called the building manager, who let himself into Travis's apartment while she waited in the hallway. What he found was a scene he would never forget. Travis was lying face down in the living room. Blood had pooled beneath his body and soaked into the carpet. The apartment was eerily still, the silence only broken by the hum of the refrigerator and the faint buzz of flies near the body. The manager backed out and called 911 immediately. First responders arrived within minutes, and detectives followed soon after. The initial walkthrough of the apartment raised several questions. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken windows or damaged locks. The door had been locked from the inside, and the chain was still on. Nothing appeared to be missing. Travis's wallet was on the kitchen counter. His phone was nearby, still plugged into the charger. His keys were on the table. Everything looked almost too normal, except for the brutal way he had died. Detectives noted signs of a struggle. A lamp was knocked over. Couch cushions had been displaced. One of the kitchen chairs was turned on its side. There were defensive wounds on Travis's hands, suggesting he had fought back against his attacker. Blood spatter patterns led to the conclusion that the attack had occurred in the living room and that Travis had tried to crawl toward the door before collapsing. The medical examiner later determined that Travis had been stabbed 7 times, in the chest and abdomen. The wounds were deep, delivered with force. Time of death was estimated to be sometime late Sunday night or early Monday morning. That narrowed the window, but it still left a lot of questions. Word of the murder spread quickly. Friends and co-workers were stunned. Travis was well liked in the community. He worked as a bartender at a local lounge and was known for his easygoing nature. No one could imagine why someone would want to hurt him. Police began reaching out to his contacts, building a picture of his life in the days leading up to his death. They asked about any conflicts, strange behavior, or unusual visitors. Over and over, one name kept coming up: his girlfriend, Haley Monroe. At that point, detectives had no idea just how central Haley would become to the case. Haley Monroe was known for her beauty and confidence. With long dark hair, striking eyes, and a magnetic smile, she turned heads wherever she went. On social media, she played the role of the doting girlfriend perfectly. Her Instagram feed was filled with photos of her and Travis, holding hands, at the beach, sipping wine at candlelit dinners, and posing together at concerts. To anyone scrolling through her profile, they looked like a happy, loving couple. But behind those carefully curated snapshots was a much more complicated reality. When detectives began digging into Travis's personal life, they quickly realized that his relationship with Haley wasn't as perfect as it appeared. Friends of Travis painted a different picture, one of tension, arguments, and control. One friend described Haley as intense, while another said she didn't like to share him with anyone, not even his friends. A few recalled moments when Haley would show up unexpectedly at Travis's workplace just to check on him. Some said she had a habit of going through his phone or accusing him of cheating whenever he texted a female co-worker. As police pieced together more details, they learned that Haley had a history of jealousy-fueled outbursts. An ex-boyfriend claimed she once slashed his tires after an argument. Another said she threatened to post private messages online if he didn't talk to her. These past incidents had never led to formal charges, but they painted a troubling pattern. One of obsession and emotional instability. Despite the red flags, Travis had stayed in the relationship. According to his closest friends, he often made excuses for Haley's behavior, saying she was just passionate or going through things. A few said he had considered breaking up with her, but worried about how she might react. Others believed he stayed because he genuinely cared about her and hoped things would get better. Some hinted that Travis had been in touch with his ex-girlfriend recently, which may have added to the tension. The timeline of Travis's final weekend became increasingly important. On Saturday, Haley posted a smiling photo of them together at a small party. They looked happy, arm in arm. But according to witnesses, the mood at that gathering was tense. Haley appeared irritated any time Travis spoke to another woman, even briefly. Later that night, the two were seen arguing outside. In the driveway, a neighbor overheard shouting and what sounded like something breaking. Then, by Sunday evening, Travis stopped responding to texts. Calls to his phone went straight to voicemail. That was the last anyone heard from him. When detectives reviewed building security footage, they saw Haley entering Travis's apartment complex late Sunday night. She wasn't carrying anything unusual, just her purse, but she didn't leave until nearly 3 a.m., and when she did, she had a large duffel bag slung over her shoulder. That discovery raised immediate alarms. Haley hadn't mentioned any late-night visit during her initial interview. Her social media posts remained cheerful, with no mention of anything being wrong. Police knew they had to bring her in again, but they had no idea what kind of performance she would put on next. When detectives brought Haley Monroe back in for a second round of questioning, they expected tension, maybe even tears. After all, she had just lost her boyfriend in a brutal and mysterious murder. But what they encountered was something entirely different, something unsettling. Haley walked into the police station, dressed as though she were meeting friends for brunch. Her hair was perfectly styled, her makeup done with precision. She smiled easily and greeted the officers like they were acquaintances, not investigators in a homicide case. From the moment the interview began, her behavior was strange. Rather than expressing grief, anger, or confusion, she cracked jokes, complimented the lead detective's eyes, and leaned in closer than necessary. Her tone was flirtatious. Her body language seemed playful. It was as if she thought charm would shield her from suspicion. Detectives tried to steer the conversation back to the night of the murder. Haley claimed she hadn't seen Travis since their argument on Saturday night. She said she had gone home afterward and spent Sunday alone, watching shows and lighting candles, as she put it. But when shown the surveillance footage of her entering Travis's apartment around midnight Sunday, her expression didn't change. She barely blinked. At first, she tried to explain it away. She said she must have forgotten. Then she insisted she only stopped by to check in on him and left soon after. But her timing didn't match the footage. She had been inside the building for almost 3 hours. When asked what she did during that time, Haley shrugged and said they talked, maybe argued a bit, and that she left once things cooled down. She couldn't remember details, she said. She had blocked it all out because of how emotionally draining it was. What troubled detectives most wasn't just her inconsistencies. It was how little she seemed to care. Her casual tone, her constant smiles, her attempts to redirect the conversation toward light topics. It all felt rehearsed, like she was playing a part. One detective later described her behavior as disturbingly out of touch with reality. As the questioning continued, they pressed her about the duffel bag she was seen carrying out of the building. Haley insisted it was just laundry. "Old clothes I was dropping off at Goodwill," she said. But when asked where the bag was now, she claimed she didn't remember. She might have lost it, or maybe it was still in her car. Her answers grew vaguer, but her attitude never shifted. Detectives were now convinced they were dealing with someone who thought she was smarter than everyone else. Someone who believed she could manipulate the situation by pretending everything was fine. But behind the smiles and flirty comments, cracks were beginning to show. Investigators kept their tone calm, noting every inconsistent statement and unusual response. By the end of the interview, they had more than just suspicions. They had motive, opportunity, and growing evidence of deception. What they needed now was hard proof, and it wouldn't take long to find it. The turning point in the investigation came just days after Haley's second interview. Detectives had already been suspicious of the duffel bag she carried out of Travis's apartment the night he was killed. It was the one thing in the security footage that didn't belong. A bag that didn't appear with her when she entered, but one she clearly had when she left. That detail stuck with them, and they began a wide search of the surrounding area, reviewing traffic cams, checking dumpsters, and questioning nearby businesses. Their persistence paid off. A gas station employee about 2 miles from Travis's apartment recalled seeing a woman late that night tossing something into their large dumpster around 3:30 a.m. When officers reviewed the station's surveillance footage, their jaws dropped. There was Haley, unmistakably, in the same clothes seen in the earlier footage from the apartment building. She was alone, looking around nervously before lifting the heavy duffel and tossing it into the bin behind the station. Then, just as casually, she walked back to her car and drove off. The dumpster had already been collected, but police were able to track down its contents at a nearby waste processing facility. After several hours of combing through piles of refuse, they found what they were looking for: the same duffel bag seen in the footage. Inside were a set of blood-stained clothes, rubber gloves, and most importantly, a kitchen knife with traces of dried blood on the blade. Tucked into a side pocket was a photograph, ripped down the middle. One half showed Travis smiling. The other half, barely visible under a smear of something dark, showed another woman, later identified as his ex-girlfriend. It was a chilling detail, a clear symbol of rage, jealousy, or both. Forensic analysis confirmed the blood on the clothes, and knife matched Travis's DNA. Even more damning, the blood on one of the gloves also matched Haley's, but it was the watch that truly sealed her fate. Among the items retrieved was a gold wristwatch, broken and spattered with blood. Investigators compared it to photos on Haley's social media and confirmed it was hers. A swab from the band tested positive for a mixture of blood, mostly Travis's, but with a small trace of Haley's, suggesting a cut or injury sustained during the attack. With the physical evidence now overwhelming, detectives obtained a warrant to search Haley's apartment. Inside, they found more troubling signs. A journal, hidden in a drawer, contained several entries venting frustration about Travis. Some pages were torn out, but one particularly disturbing entry read, "If he thinks he can just walk away from me, he's wrong." It wasn't a confession, but it supported the picture of someone deeply unstable and possibly dangerous. Police now had everything they needed: motive, opportunity, a false alibi, and a pile of physical evidence linking Haley to the crime. She was arrested without incident at her apartment. As she was handcuffed and led to the patrol car, she smiled for the cameras waiting outside. Not a single word of protest, just a smile. The trial of Haley Monroe drew intense media attention. By the time jury selection began, the case had already become a local sensation. Headlines focused not just on the shocking murder of Travis Blake, but on Haley's bizarre behavior during the investigation. Her calm demeanor, the flirtatious remarks to detectives, and the now infamous smile as she was led away in handcuffs. To the public, she had become something of a villain wrapped in glamour, and the courtroom only amplified that image. From the start, the prosecution laid out a clear, chilling narrative. They described Haley as possessive and jealous, someone who couldn't tolerate rejection. Travis, they said, had been trying to distance himself from the relationship, possibly reconnecting with an ex. That was the trigger. Fueled by insecurity and rage, Haley went to his apartment under the cover of night, confronted him, and when things didn't go her way, snapped. The evidence was undeniable. The surveillance footage, the duffel bag, the murder weapon, the blood on her watch, and the journal entries full of resentment. The jury listened closely as forensic experts walked them through every detail. How the knife matched the wounds, how the blood pattern showed a struggle, and how the duffel bag ended up in a dumpster miles from the scene. Every day, the case against Haley grew stronger. The defense, meanwhile, tried to cast doubt on the motive. They portrayed Haley as emotionally fragile, yes, but incapable of such violence. They suggested that the evidence could have been planted, that her presence at the apartment didn't prove intent. They even hinted that someone else could have been involved. But these arguments failed to gain traction. The jury had seen too much, especially the footage of her casually discarding the duffel bag in the early morning hours, as if tossing out garbage. Throughout the trial, Haley showed little emotion. She listened quietly, occasionally nodding or tilting her head, almost as though she were observing a play rather than participating in her own murder trial. When the prosecution replayed parts of her police interview, where she smiled and flirted with detectives, members of the jury visibly shifted in their seats. It was unsettling. Her tone and body language felt disconnected from the gravity of the situation. Closing arguments were swift and powerful. Prosecutors painted her as a woman who thought she was smarter than everyone else, someone who believed she could lie, manipulate, and smile her way out of a murder charge. But they said, no one is above the truth. It took the jury less than 4 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty of second-degree murder. When the judge announced the sentence, 28 years in prison without the possibility of parole, Haley didn't cry. She didn't argue. She looked straight ahead, lips curled into a faint smile, the same one that had chilled detectives from the very beginning. For many, it was the final mask slipping into place, a last attempt to control how the world would remember her. But no amount of charm could undo what she had done.